Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
Reed, I gotta tell you something, man. I cannot be more excited. Just have my inner patriotism come out here tonight. You know why?
But we're talking about the American, baby.
Yes, sir. We have one of the most patriotic conferences that we have. And really, you can't tell the story of America without the story of college football. And we have a great story to tell here tonight. We got the American Conference doing what we did, similar to what we did a few days ago, where we talked about the Sun Belt in depth. But one major difference, the American had the audacity. They had the audacity to give us a schedule. So a lot to dig into tonight. We got winners and losers from the American Conference schedule review from earlier, about a week ago, and also given our rack and stack in terms of how we view about each of these teams in the American. So going to be a jam-packed show here tonight. Really looking forward to it. Joined by my co-host, Reed, man. How are you doing tonight, my guy?
Doing good, man. Almost feeling patriotic of sorts. You know, we're talking about the American Conference. So what, what better way to, continue the early preview series, than feeling a little patriotic on a Monday.
Feeling absolutely patriotic on a Monday, hearing the soaring bald eagles, the only conference that has a conference mascot. I'm surprised that no other conferences have picked up on it yet. I think they should. But yeah, we are going to have a jam-packed show here tonight. And I hope you guys enjoy yourself. Hope you grab your favorite drink, grab your favorite food, grab whatever you need to grab on this slightly chilly Monday evening, depending on where you're at. If you are, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube platform. And if you're watching on any other platforms, always appreciate the follow button on those other platforms as well. Now, before we get into it and really talking about these schedules, I really want to talk about a really fascinating quirk that we have with the American, right? Because of Army and Navy. Because those two play after the regular season is over for the annual Army-Navy game, one of the best rivalry games that we have in college football. They're going to be the only two teams in this conference that have multiple buys besides Memphis. Memphis getting that second buy because they do get to play UNLV in week 0. And I'm really curious to see how much of an advantage that gives our military academies, especially when we get into the dog days of the middle of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna spoil what we're about to get into, but I think it definitely plays a big favor to Navy, especially just looking at the back half of their schedule. That bye week comes at a very fortunate time for them. So I mean that's part of the tradition of the Army Navy game, that they solely get their own slot. Now I know they're talking about putting it on Thanksgiving potentially, just giving them their own time slot instead of their own specific day. I am opposed to that. I think the Army Navy game should have their own day, solely for the Army Navy game, and then the Heisman Trophy ceremony in the evening. I digress. I think that could play a big favor for one, if not both of these teams, but I think more in favor of one team than the other. I'm not going to spoil as we're about to get into our winners and losers of the schedule, but for sure, it definitely plays advantage to Army and Navy for sure.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm certainly going to be like fascinated about. Although I will say that both of these teams, even though they do have 2 buys instead of the one, both teams do have a 7 game stretch that they have to deal with in between the buys. So I thought that was an interesting scheduling quirk where both teams they'll only have 2 or 3 games to start the year, and then they have their first buy. Then they have the 7 game stretch, which I know we talked about when we've done winners and
Mhm.
losers for the other conferences. A 7 game stretch doesn't sound horrific, but for having 2 buys, I thought that was an unfortunate break for both programs. And then you get the 1 buy, and then you get to finish strong last couple of games of the year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few teams here that definitely have a gauntlet, because they get a relatively early bye, as we'll get into in a little bit. But I think it's very fortunate that they get 2 buys. I mean, every team, for the most part, gets actually no, because not everyone plays that week 0 game. Um, but I think it again, we'll talk about it basically with everyone's schedule. Where your bye falls plays a big part in your schedule dynamics, especially like if it's early in the season, then you have to play 7 or 8 straight games, or you at least get like a good middle bye spot. So that, I mean, where your bye falls is obviously very important for a team's success throughout the season for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely want to like cover that particular scheduling quirk. I just thought that was really fascinating. Army and Navy being the only 2 teams that have multiple buys without
Mhm.
playing in a week 0 game. We know like USC and Memphis, for example, they will both have multiple buys for a variety of reasons. But let's go ahead now and jump onto our big board. This is going to get really gonna get real familiar. Not only going after the schedule reaction, but then also going out and racking and stacking each of these American Conference teams. I do want to jump into it in terms of who I think really got screwed over by the schedule. I think in particular, I think it's going to be the Rice Owls for me.
Mm.
This Rice football team, at some point in the year, they're going to have to play 8 consecutive games in a row before they come across a bye. So that's an incredibly tough break for Rice that they're going to have to deal with. I did not like the bye split for the Rice Owls, and then going into the actual schedule itself, I do think that they do have a very particularly challenging non-conference schedule, and I'm talking about it from a top to bottom perspective. They do have
Yeah.
Houston Christian. That should be a winnable game, I would think for Rice. But then you jump into the rest of your non-conference schedule. Notre Dame going to play against them on the road. That's obviously going to be really difficult. Notre Dame does have experience playing against triple option teams like a Rice, for example, playing against Navy every single year. But then you also play against Western Michigan. You have them at home, but you're talking about a Western Michigan team that is returning a starting quarterback, bringing some core offensive line pieces. They won the MAC last year. They are the Midwestern Darlings. And then you finish off your non-conference by playing against Fresno State on the road as well. Fresno State, they aren't a conference champion, but they did beat the ever-living daylights out of the team that eventually won their conference in Boise State. So looking at Rice from a top to bottom perspective, I think they're personally the biggest loser in terms of this schedule review that happened last week. But I'm definitely curious, if we're on the same wavelength or you're thinking in a different direction.
I'm going in a different direction for my biggest loser. I'm going with the East Carolina Pirates. Uh,
Okay.
you open up the season in Bryant-Denny Stadium against Alabama, which is never an easy task. You come back home, you have App State, which is I think a very intriguing matchup, just solely because we've talked about App State before on the show. We expect them to at least be somewhat better than they were last year. So I think App State's an intriguing matchup. But then you get Old Dominion on the road, uh, down there in the Norfolk area. So I think Old Dominion's also going to be, they're going to take a slight step back from last year, losing the amount of production that they did. But I think on the road in your third game of the season, ODU is going to be a contender in the Sun Belt for sure. So I think that's not a tall task either. And then you have a FCS opponent before your bye week, but then you have to play 8 straight conference games. So a week 5 bye week isn't favorable. Your road games in conference at UAB, which could be a test. We saw Memphis go on the road there last year and lose. At Memphis with Charles Huff, at Charlotte, and at Army. So obviously going to a service academy is never an easy task as well. They also have conference opponents in Temple, South Florida, and FAU. And Rice, but the real key there is South Florida at home. That could be a huge game in conference schedule against arguably the best team in the conference. So I think they could get by with those other 3 home games in conference, but I think South Florida is the biggest test there. But I think their non-conference could be tough if they could potentially be 2-2 after their non-conference schedule, and then obviously time will tell how they play out after their non-conference schedule. But I feel like East Carolina, a lot of people are high on them. I'm not saying I'm not high on them, but I think that their schedule is definitely not favorable, especially they have early back-to-back road tests at UAB and at Memphis, which I think could be a challenge for them, especially. I mean, those are their second and third conference games, which is a weird quirk in their schedule. They play a home game, 2 away games, 2 home games, 2 away games, and then a home game. So I think East Carolina is my biggest loser personally.
Yeah, and I know you touched up on those 8 conference games in a row that Eastern Carolina is going to have to go up against Navy, and I believe it was either Army or Navy. I believe it was Army. Someone could correct me in the comment section if I'm misspeaking on this. Army is also going to be coming off of a bye when they play against Eastern Carolina for their conference game. Which could, depending on how things are shaking out in the month of November, that could be a very pivotal game. Army being a little bit more well rested, while Eastern Carolina, they are playing their 6th or their 7th game of the in a row, especially with the amount of discipline required to play against triple option teams. It really tests your patience as a defensive player. I would say it would be, that's going to be a really difficult test for East Carolina. Now, what you guys will see like on the screen below is you see Colton Stuff is on here as well. Our boy from O&O Sports, he's not doing the greatest tonight, so he's not here, but he did. He was so gracious to wake up and send me his stuff. So his stuff is here. His analysis is here in spirit. He'll have to elaborate on it at a later time, and he might even do it with his own content at a later point. But with that being said, we will see Tulane be his biggest loser, which I thought was a little surprising. I know that he was certainly not a very big fan at all of what we've seen from our like Will Hall in this coaching staff. I thought it was a little surprising. How are you feeling about his about Tulane's schedule going into the year?
Yeah, I had it pulled up. So their non-conference it's okay. They start the season on the road at Duke, which, I mean, Duke obviously lost a lot of production offensively, so they're kind of an unknown at the moment. South Alabama at home in the non-conference from the Sun Belt. We've talked about it the other night. I personally think South Alabama is going to be an improved team. So that could pose a challenge. On the road at Kansas State. Manhattan, Kansas is never an easy place to play. And then also Southern Miss at home to finish off their non-conference schedule. So, it's definitely the non-conference will pose its own challenges. And then once again, an early bye week. And then they have to play 8 straight conference games. Your first conference game is on the road at Army, which, again, a triple option team, never easy to prepare against. And then your first home game in conference is against Charles Huff's Memphis. So UTSA at home, North Texas at home. Their last 2 games is North Texas at home, and then on the road at South Florida. So It's definitely not the easiest schedule by any means, especially we expect Tulane to have a little bit of, at least I personally expect Tulane to have a little bit of regression. Uh, one, because of Will Hall taking over the reins as the head coach, but also they're losing a ton of production from last season. So, uh, I mean, we'll get into where I view Tulane in the conference, but I definitely think this schedule could pose some challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was someone that certainly felt like this was a schedule that I did consider to have as the biggest loser. Was
Yeah.
going to be a tough schedule for them as well. Especially considering of what you just mentioned. And they're going to play some like some pretty tough teams in the non-conference. Duke, we just saw them. They won the ACC title. Kansas State, that's a solid football team as well. And then Southern Miss, we saw them in a bowl game last year before they jump into really the epitome of conference play. And we talked about how the SEC is so tough, or at least is perceived as a really tough conference over on the power side of things. You could really say the same thing as well for the American as a whole over on the G6 side of things. Now, with that being said, taking a look at our biggest winners on the other side, and I'm curious to see what you're feeling about this team as well. So Colton had USF as his biggest winner, especially considering what they went through the last couple of years. Didn't know if that was a team that you were also considering as your biggest winner, or was there somebody else that you were potentially eyeing?
South Florida was definitely in the thought process for me, but I went in a different direction. I went with the Navy midshipmen as my biggest winner.
Okay.
Solely because I think having a third bye week coming off of, I would say, two lighter games on your schedule. They open up the season with Towson, an FCS opponent, fellow Maryland school, and then on the road at FAU. What's wrong with going down to Florida on September 12th? Open up your season. So two pretty easy games for Navy standards, opening up their season. Then they go on the road, UAB and Air Force. Of course, Air Force Commander-in-Chief's trophy game. That's going to be a huge one. They get Tulsa at home. On the road at UTSA could pose a challenge. We saw UTSA knock off Tulane at home last year, so this stuff could get wild in San Antonio. But then this is the stretch that really defines Navy season. They get North Texas at home, which I think North Texas is going to be a way regressed team based off last season. They get Notre Dame at a neutral site, which Notre Dame is Notre Dame. That's always going to be a challenge. They get Temple at home, bye week, home against Memphis, and then at Charlotte. So I think realistically, aside from that Notre Dame game, they could be potentially 4-1 in their last 5 games. So
Okay.
I think Navy, their schedule shakes out very well, especially because, like we alluded to earlier, that double bye is going to play huge, especially in that last stretch that I talked about. Getting a bye right in between your final 5 games is going to be huge, especially going into what could be a potential massive conference game against Memphis in week 11. So I personally think the Navy midshipmen are my biggest winner, just solely because also they avoid some of the bigger teams in the conference. They avoid Tulane, and then their hardest opponents they get at home: North Texas, Memphis. The real road test for them in conference is UTSA. So I think Navy got a good luck of the draw on their schedule.
Yeah, and people are going to scoff at the idea of UTSA being the toughest test because of what their overall record ended up being last year.
Yeah.
People don't realize UTSA in the Alamo Dome and then UTSA outside of the Alamo Dome, it was two completely different teams. I mean, we're talking about a UTS team at home who blew out this Tulane football team, a Tulane football team that not only won the American, but they were the primary G5 representative in the college football playoff. So, I mean, UTSA, that is not a team that you want to mess with in the Alamo Dome for sure. So I'm curious to see how Navy handles that as we approach ourselves into the Saturdays in the fall. I actually agreed with Colton, though. I ended up going with USF. I thought it was a very forgiving schedule compared to what they are able to accomplish over the last couple of years. Now, what I will say is, unlike this past year, if USF wants to make the college football playoff in year 1 under Brian Hartline, there's not as much of that margin for error, almost
Yeah.
like what we saw with North Texas last year, where North Texas, they did not play a single power conference opponent. Same thing here with USF, but I think it does provide a chance for Brian Hartline to really find himself as a head coach, because going from, being a positional coach, and we know how great he is as a developer of wide receivers, had some good moments as the offensive coordinator for Ohio State in his sole year in that position as well. It's a lot different when you're a head coach and now you're in charge of the entire operation versus just an aspect of your team. So I think this is a good opportunity for Brian Hartline to get some good experience as
Mhm.
a head coach, without being in too many games where it might not have as many toss-up situations, or games where USF is expected to be a heavy underdog in for sure, unlike what we saw last year. So that's why I really like this schedule. I think it gives
Mhm.
Brian Hartline some room to work with to grow as a head coach, because he is inexperienced in that department.
Yeah, totally agree. You made a great point. This is a good first year schedule. A good schedule to get his feet up under him, get experience as a head coach, and in a very competitive conference from top to bottom. Uh, yeah, looking at their schedule now, they're two hardest opponents they get at home, and then they're two of the last three games of the season. Memphis and Tulane, they get both of them at home. East Carolina on a Friday night, November 7th, could potentially pose a test. But yeah, South Florida easily was in that conversation for me with biggest winners between them and Navy. So if I have like a 1A, 1B type of deal, definitely South Florida is. I mean, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
I'm very high on South Florida in this year with Brian Hartline. The biggest question for me with them is if he uh, is the primary play caller, or at least has some say in the play calling, because we saw, as you alluded to with Ohio State last year, when he was the primary play caller, they were very dynamic, very heavy in the play action game, taking shots downfield with the dynamic receivers that they did have. So that's my biggest question for me. If they can nail their play calling and at least be somewhat, average at best on defense, because I feel like a Brian Hartline team is going to put up points. So if they're even somewhat modest on defense, this team is very competitive and a favorite in the G5 for sure.
Yeah, and we're definitely excited to jump into the other aspect of this pre-spring preview, that we have the American Conference being able to rack and stack these teams, which I'm very excited to get into. I'm going to be very interested to see how much of the same wavelength that Reed and I share, or are we going to be on two opposite ends of the spectrum on certain teams, like we saw the other night when doing the Sun Belt. But this is going to be our biggest winners and losers of the American Conference from a schedule standpoint. Definitely let me know what your guys' thoughts are, whether you're watching from the live chat or whether you're going to watch this after the fact in the comments section, or when I post this on Twitter tomorrow morning. You can also let me know over there as well. I'm sure Colton will elaborate on his choices in the Twitter comment section. I know that one for sure. Now, with that being said, because we almost had a oopsie like before the show started. All right. So now we go ahead and jump into what we got in terms of our. So, same one that we have in terms of, okay, no kidding. Here is our rankings that we have from the American Conference. Going to do the same thing that we did here the other night, where we ranked these teams 1 through 14, starting from our bottom. We're real enjoyers of Drake's old albums over here, starting from the bottom. We're gonna work our way up slowly but surely. I know Reed appreciates that deep down. He won't say it, but it'll give me that credit. So
Yes.
I'm really curious as we go ahead and jump things here. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts in a moment. But for me, when I was looking at this conference as a whole, to start things off, I did have Charlotte as my number 14 team. They were the worst team in this conference last year. First year head coach Tim Albin coming over from Ohio. They go 1-11, and that one win was, I believe, against Monmouth. They hardly beat Monmouth. And at the same time, I expected to see a huge, not a huge jump, but a significant jump from a Tim Albin coach team. We saw his work at Ohio. But to be honest with you, I was looking through the transfer portal acquisitions. I was looking through high school recruiting. To be honest with you, just looking at it from a baseline perspective, I feel like this is the same team as last year. They did bring in Logan Mountain. He's a tight end from McNeese. There's some breakout potential with him. I know the folks over 247 were excited about his physicals, but they do lose one of their best offensive weapons as well in Javon Nicholas. He ends up transferring to Duke, where he had almost 800 scrimmage yards, 5 touchdowns last season. So, and maybe someone can make some jumps internally. Maybe Tim Albin likes his guys more than we do, but just looking at this team and what we saw from him last year, I couldn't put them higher than 14.
Yeah, you're not going to get much pushback from me on that. I also had Charlotte as my 14th team. I mean, I'm not gonna beat around the bush here. You basically elaborated on everything I was gonna say. They didn't really improve much from their roster last season, and the key players that they did have, they lost to the portal. So Charlotte is definitely going to be a bottom feeder in this league. If they aren't last, they're going to be in the bottom three. Uh, they definitely have an uphill climb. And I had the complete schedule. I didn't even fully look at their schedule, but we're not talking about schedules here. Charlotte, yeah, they're okay. Good. We're all consensus here between the four of us on this graphic. Yeah, Charlotte. They're going to be at the bottom looking up. So that's for sure. Not much to add on from what you pointed out, but definitely the Charlotte 49ers are my 14th team in the American.
Yeah, and it seems that both Colton and AT, who couldn't join us tonight, but was so gracious to send us their rankings as well.
Yes.
For tonight's show, they also agreed. So right off the top, we did not in fact save the graphic. So if Charlotte has a breakout year, hopefully Charlotte football gives us credit for being a motivating factor for a successful season. And you're number 2 under Tim Albin now.
I do hope they put it in the hype videos though.
I hope they put it in the hype videos as well. You know, that's going to be an easy way for us to get followers on all of our platforms. I'll take what I can get. Reed. Now,
yes.
Moving on to number 13. You know, Reed, I'm curious with who you guys your 13th best team. Who you got slightly ahead of Charlotte, at least as of right now.
I'm going with the University of Alabama at Birmingham, aka UAB. Alex Mortensen, now as the full-time head coach, took over as a interim role last year. Did get a huge win against Memphis. We can't overlook that, but I think this is just a building year for Alex Mortensen. Again, first-time head coach and now his full-time role. I think this is just a building year for UAB. I mean, not much. They didn't really do much of notability to me in the portal nor high school recruiting this past cycle. So I think this is a year for Alex Mortensen to get his feet up under him. Don't have any hate against UAB or Alex Mortensen. I think that this is just a bounce back year. Could see him potentially be around 500, maybe push for a bowl game. But yeah, I have UAB at 13.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I actually do have UAB a touch higher than you do. So I actually had UAB come in as I believe I had them. Oh, let me look at my notes because I have a little pea brain mentality. I had them as my 11th best team in terms of where they come in, at least for this alliteration of the American Conference rankings. So first and foremost, I know that Alex Mortensen, he is an experienced coach. This is his first time as a head coach. Yeah. I do like, even though he did went 2-4, and I do have questions about his ability to lead a football team, I do like that he was able to get a big win against Memphis. And even if he ends up being a similar caliber coach as Trent Dilfer, who was the head coach of his team last year, I still think it's going to be at least an upgrade at the head coaching position, just from an addition by subtraction type of deal. You know, I thought Trent Dilfer, and he made some excuses on some podcasts, irrelevant to our eyes. So I feel like Trent Dilfer, you know, to a point, his ego got in the way, whereas Alex Mortensen, he doesn't seem to carry that same ego. So I do think even if he's the same caliber of coach, at least he's going to be more willing to make the wholesale changes needed to eventually get this thing turned around. I do think that he actually made some pretty solid additions. I think the running back room is going to be really interesting. They brought in Roderick Robinson out of Georgia. He's a former blue chip recruit as well. They also brought in Braylon McReynolds as well. He was a running back at ULM. He was their lead back, over 700 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then they also overhauled the defense as well, bringing in productive guys from the FCS level and even bringing in a couple of quality G5 players like a Christopher Spencer out of Old Dominion, as well as a Courage Ugo. Could be an all-conference name team.
Great
Never
name.
know.
Yes.
He's from Utah State as well. That was really the biggest weakness of their defense. UAB was going to put up points, and I think that's still going to potentially happen. So I actually had them a touch higher from that standpoint. I'm curious to see what our friends in Colton and AT, what they think as well. So Colton is with you. He has UAB at 13th as well. And then if I could find all right, here we go. AT, he's with me. He is gonna have UAB at 11th. So AT and I so far on the same page. Where Reed, it looks like you and Colton sharing the same wavelength so far.
Yeah, I mean, great minds think alike. What can I say?
So. Yeah, great minds think alike, and mine is a little pea brain. I'm living in your world, Reed. That's for sure. Well, we'll go ahead and jump into what I have as my 13th best team. However, a little bit different from you, and so I'm curious to hear what you think is of this particular football team. I have the Tulsa Golden Hurricane as my number 13 team. Similar situation from UAB, right? Trey Lamb, he does come in, first year head coach, shows some promise. 4-8 in his first year, and they showed some signs of life in the month of November. My thing though is similar to UAB. Their weakness was on the defensive side of the football, and I would actually argue that they somehow got worse defensively. Few of their better guys on the defensive side of the ball all entered the transfer portal, went to Power 4 schools. Joe Hajale, Jadan Burnett, Ray Connie. They all left, and that was a few of their best players that they had on defense that are no longer here. They also lose Brady Foley as well. He was really the vocal point of that offense last year. He transfers to Louisville as well. I think the running back room, again, is going to be interesting. But at the same time, I think the defense is going to be a little worse, and I'm not convinced the offense is going to be any better for Trey Lamb. Not saying that it won't work out for him as a head coach, but I have my reservations about Tulsa, given that they might be worse defensively than last year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I have Tulsa right a tick above your spot. I have them at number 11. I think they could slightly improve defensively this year, but I mean, it's going to be a challenge. I think that they made some solid additions through the portal. Jaden Madkins from Louisiana Tech, Caldra. Oh, I'm going to trouble with this. Caldra Williford from Baylor at corner. And then also a couple additions on the offensive side. Seth Davis, running back from Mississippi State. Jimmy Callaway, receiver from within conference Tulane. So I think those could be some impact players on both sides of the ball. I think Tulsa takes a slight tick better than last year. Not saying that they blow the doors off the place, but a slight tick better, a potential bowl game team for sure. I view Tulsa as the 11th best team in the American.
Yeah, try saying that 5 times faster. We'll see what Colton and AT have. Colton does have them at 11 as well. Did Colton copy your notes, dude?
Bro, he probably just typed into ChatGPT, hack Reed's computer and get me what he had in his notes. That's probably what he did.
Yeah. Are you saying use ChatGPT?
No.
All right. Well, watch this. AT is about to be number 13 for Tulsa. Number 12. He's got him a little bit higher. So AD we have confirmation that he did not, in fact, copy me. But for you, Reed, the jury is
I
still out, so to
I-
speak.
I'm
So
gonna have to give Colton a call after this show because I'm gonna have some choice words. That's for sure. I'm gonna have some choice words.
some choice words that is for sure that we're gonna have with Colin. I would love to sit in on that phone call. I'll tell you what. But we'll move on. We're going to move on to what I have is my number 12 team in the American Conference. You know, a team that you should never play with because my Baba once told me you never play with food is Rice.
Yep.
I do have the Rice Owls coming in as my number 12 team in this conference. I will say this about Rice. I thought Scott Abel did an admirable job in year number 1, and they do have Quinton Jackson coming back. He is a third-team all-conference guy, and I imagine he's going to be one of the vocal points of this offense because of the fact that they do run that triple option set that we talked about earlier tonight. So a lot of people get involved in that running game. They do lose Chase Jenkins, though. They lost him to Kansas, which I think is going to be a tremendous loss. And then they do also lose a couple of key defensive players in Ty Morris and Marcus Williams. Just looking at things from a baseline perspective, they could be a well-coached team, but just looking at things from a baseline perspective, Rice is going to have a tough time winning games just from the fact that unlike an Army and a Navy where their systems are already established, Scott Abel is still doing that, and it's one of the lesser teams in the conference just from a pure talent perspective.
Yeah, I think now just looking at the additions they made portal and recruiting wise, nothing too nothing like too out of the ordinary. They do get a couple intriguing players coming in from the portal. Preston Zinter was an edge rusher at Notre Dame. He comes in. Davis Lane, a wide receiver from Virginia. Although they do run the triple option, it is interesting to see that they get a couple of Power 4 level players. Barry Jackson, also a receiver from Cincinnati. So I mean, to me, it's just interesting, bringing in Power 4 level players at receiver, making you think, are they going to try to sling the rock a little bit more, as opposed to their traditional triple option? That's just something intriguing to me. But overall, I think they're a solid team, Rice, for at least based on the additions that they've made. And I was trying to pull up their depth chart. It does look like they're losing 2 starters on the offensive line, their center and right tackle, David Stickle, great name, and Sean Sullivan at right tackle. So, those are 2 big holes. Obviously, the center is arguably the most important member of the offensive line. So just curious how that plays a role in their offense, having to replace their center. But I mean, as we did allude to, they do run the triple option. It is interesting and worth noting, their top 6 receivers on their depth chart are gone by way of transfer or graduation. So that's just an interesting, note to make, that their top 6 receivers from last season are gone. But as for Rice, I have them as my 12th team. So we are aligned there. I think I give them the benefit of the doubt just solely because they do run a triple option style offense. That's obviously very challenging to line up against, defend a scheme for. So I do give them the benefit of the doubt there. But Scott Abel, I think, does have Rice going in the right direction. Obviously 5-7 isn't a great mark, but you flip around a couple games on that schedule from last season, and they're a bowl team. So I definitely think Rice, could take a slight step up in this season with Scott Abel, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I believe in Scott Abel. I just know that it's going to be a challenge because I know in the majority of their games, they're going to have to out execute. They're not going to be able to roll their headgear out and assume that they're going to win. So it's going to be a challenging year for Scott Abel, but he's familiar with winning in those kind of situations because he was able to find a way to win at Davidson. We'll check out what we have in terms of who does. So Colton also has Rice at 12. I know the allegations are really strong tonight.
Yeah, and speaking of Colton, he texted me. He said, "Tell Jake if he doesn't read any of my notes for any other team, please read what I have for Tulane." So if you don't read any of his notes, at least read what he put for Tulane.
All right, I was going to I didn't want to take words out of Colin's mouth because that's his story to tell, but I got
Yes.
him particularly for Tulane. As for our boy AT, all right, so AT does have Rice at 13, so you know we're almost completely aligned here. AT a little bit lower than the three of us on the Rice football team. So 4 is yours though, my man. We are now getting into this top 10.
Yep.
Who are we feeling in terms of who is your number 10 team going into this upcoming season? At least from what we've seen in late February, early March.
Yeah, I'm going with the Florida Atlantic Owls. Under former glory of Lane Kiffin, they are no longer at that glory with Lane Kiffin at the helm because he is at a way better height than he is at Florida Atlantic. But I digress. I'm going with Florida Atlantic at 10. Wasn't a huge fan of the additions that they've made portal wise and recruiting, both in the lower half of the conference rankings. But again, similar to that Rice team that I just alluded to, they do bring in a lot of former Power 4 talent. Amar Reynolds at corner from Illinois, Blake Burris, defensive lineman from SMU, Benjamin Galloway, an offensive tackle from Georgia Tech. So they do plug in a couple of Power 4 experienced players to this roster, but I think FAU is kind of in that middle pack of like 10-7. I think could either be, you know, a 7-5 team playing in a bowl game or 5-7 and they miss out, or, you know, get an alternate spot into a bowl game. I think FAU is definitely in that middle of the pack team, that grouping of teams within the conference. So I'm comfortable putting them at 10, but definitely upwards of, you know, being in that 8-7 range for sure. But I'm going to put FAU at 10.
Yeah, and I was a little bit higher on FAU myself. I had them not only in my top 10, I actually had them as high as number 9. I do like that they do bring in multiple all conference guys. They bring them back. Easton Messer, he was a second team all conference guy. He's back. And then they have multiple all conference guys on the defensive side of the ball in CJ Doggett and Leon Hart, who are going to be foundational for your front seven. They do need to figure out outside of Easton Messer who's going to step up in terms of that receiving game. They do lose both Assad Wasim and Jay Sean Platt in the transfer portal. So both of those guys are gone. So who's going to step up and be that playmaker opposite of Easton Messer? I think that's a really big question that needs to be answered during spring ball and going into summer camp as well. And then on top of that, you know, can some of these guys that they brought in from the FCS level or even below, could they have meaningful roles for this FAU football team as well? One person I'm really curious about is Leonard Farrow. He is a transfer from Fairmont State, which I don't believe he is even a Division I school. They're either a Division II or an NAIA. He had over 1,600 yards rushing last year. So I'm curious to see if he has some kind of role in this offense this year, as well as can some of those guys that were productive at the FCS level, like a Nate Fisher and a Bo Simpson Neely, can that production translate? Because if so, I think they can definitely get higher than number 9 and be in this top half. But because there's more questions than some of these other top half teams, that's why I had them at number 9 for now, which I kind of spoiled when I was looking to update the graphics. So Colton was a little bit higher, not AT. AT is number 10. But it turns out Reed did not copy your rankings. Because Colton has them at number 7.
Yeah.
So number 7, maybe being a little bit higher based on what I mentioned, if those questions do get answered and they get answered in the affirmative. And what he wrote for FAU, he does love the fact that this staff is intact. He likes the fact that they retain the majority of their staffs from last year. Colton Viscamp, I didn't even mention him. He has all conference upside if he can figure out how to stop turning the football over. And then
that's easier said than done, Jake.
Yeah. And then they've also, according to him, got unquestionably better at the defensive line in the skill position. So
Yep.
because I know he's a little bit more of an outlier at FAU than the rest of us, I wanted to at least let it be known that's why he's a little bit higher. So I think they can be an upper half team, like I mentioned, but from a baseline perspective, at least for me, I feel
Yeah.
9's appropriate for now.
Yeah, and just to touch real quick on Colton's notes about Caden Veldkamp, he threw for 3,600 yards last year with 23 touchdowns. He hit the nail right on the head. As long as he reduces his 17 interceptions, he's an all-conference level quarterback. I mean, the dude threw 3,600 yards. Like, that is all-conference level play. Again, if he reduces his interceptions, 2/3. I don't see why FAU can't be a competitive team. Like now, granted, that's going to take a step back, I think, because of the weapons that he did lose, aka Jay-Sean Platt. But Easton Messer, excuse me, is still there, like you said. So what playmaker can step up on the opposite side of him? But again, 3,600 yards is nothing to overlook.
Yeah, if Caden Veldkamp, if you produced a like a white people version of Jameis Winston, that was basically what Caden Veldkamp was last year for FAU, right? He's going to throw a lot of yards, he's going to throw a lot of touchdowns, but he did throw a lot of interceptions too, as you mentioned. So if he can clean that up, FAU becomes that much more of a dangerous football team for sure.
Hey, Jameis Winston had one of the most historic seasons in NFL history. The dude went 30 for 30. Like
they did.
What are we talking about? Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not slandering Jameis Winston at all. He's a fun player to watch. I'm just saying that, like, NFL Jameis Winston, that's what Caden Veldkamp played like last year.
Yes.
For FAU, which is both exciting and terrifying at the same time, depending on how you look at it. Another team that I think could be pretty exciting to watch this year, that has some upside. I think Temple definitely fits the bill as well. I have Temple as my number 10 team in my rankings. Really high on Casey Keeler. He did a fantastic job at Sam Houston. He comes in and actually does have Temple off to a fast start. Didn't love how they finished their season off. They finished on a multi-game losing streak. It ultimately cost them an opportunity to go to a bowl game. So they lost a little bit of luster for me. And, especially when you get into the top half of the American and comparing Temple to these teams, that type of stuff matters. I do think that they're going to be pretty dynamic offensively, though. They brought in 2 wide receivers, one in Chase Freeman and one in Devontae Green, that are both productive at their previous stops. So I think Temple is going to have a dangerous passing game. They also added Jaden Gold, the safety out of UCF, who's a blue chip recruit as well. I do think that there's some interesting pieces in place, but they have slightly more questions than the teams that I have in the top half. But I might be a little bit lower on Temple than some of you guys. But I'm curious what you think about this Temple team, though.
I have them a notch higher than you. I have them as my number 9 team. Biggest question mark for me with Temple is who's going to be starting at quarterback. They do bring in Jackson Smolik from Penn State and a Johnny Shepard from Washington State. That's the biggest question mark for me with Temple is who they have as their starting quarterback. Evan Simon is no longer there. 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions last year, 2,100 yards. Like that's lofty production to replace. So, and to replace it with kind of inexperience in Smolik or Shepard is a big question mark for Temple. They lose their top 2 backs in Jay Ducker and Hunter Smith. So who replaces that production? They do bring in a couple of backs out of the portal, but they are a bit unproven to this point. Jojo Bermudez, that's the one I wanted to point out. He is the top receiver coming back, 500 yards last season with 4 touchdowns alongside Colin Chase. So they do have proven production at receiver. But again, quarterback, most important position on the field. That's the biggest question mark for Temple with me. If they hit on quarterback, I see him in that FAU range, upwards of being, 6 or 7 in the conference. So I'm sorry.
Look at me affecting you with my brain rot.
Dude, dude, your B brain is affecting me. Temple at number 9. I'm comfortable putting them in the middle of the pack of the conference.
Yeah.
Aside from their guaranteed loss in week 2 to Penn State, but I digress.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there's certainly some fascinating pieces on this Temple team, but like you mentioned, because of inexperienced at quarterback and some other question marks that they're gonna have to deal with on their roster. They just need these guys to step up internally.
Yes.
Because there wasn't a ton of additions that they made for the portal, so maybe it's one of those things where Casey Keeler likes what he has on the roster, but
I will
they have to answer those questions before I feel comfortable moving up. Colton, or actually AT was
Whoa.
very high
Whoa,
on
he's
Temple.
high on that recruiting class. I mean, they're second in the conference for their recruiting class this past cycle. He's expecting a big impact, I assume, or one of those quarterbacks to hit.
Yeah, AT, if you're watching in the live show right now, and you want to elaborate on how you feel
Wow.
about this Temple team, man, I'm definitely all ears. Yeah, Colton is a little bit closer to what Reed and I have, closer to that middle of the pack, whereas maybe AT feels that this Temple squad could possibly be a dark horse. So that it's going to be interesting to see who ends up being right and who ends up being looking like a silly goose, so to speak, right? Uh, but we're getting closer to that top half, Read. So before we officially get there, who's this last team that officially makes this bottom half for you, man?
I have the Army Black Knights as my number 8 team. Uh, Again, another team that runs a triple option offense, so I will give them the benefit of the doubt there. It's very hard to um, plan and scheme around that. But again, a service academy isn't going to notably make huge additions through the portal. They most of their big additions have to be through recruiting. So for Army's sake, I'm a Jeff Monken fan. Now, hopefully my dad is not listening to this as we speak, as a Naval Academy grad himself, but I'm a Jeff Monken guy. I think he's a very solid head coach, and I'm low-key surprised he hasn't gotten a shot at a P4 job. I know he's been in conversations with them before, but I'm high on Jeff Monken, dude. And especially they had a down year in Army standards last year. I expect a bounce back for the most part. Like Army is capable of being in that 6 to 8 win range consistently. I expect them to have a bounce back year. I expect that of Jeff Monken as their head coach. So again, triple option, Jeff Monken as a head coach. They're middle of the pack for me.
Yeah, and I feel pretty similar about this Army football team as well. You mentioned that most of their additions have to be through recruiting. I mean, all of them have to be recruiting because unlike most of these other teams at the FBS level, because of the fact that they serve the Department of Defense or Department of War, depending on who you're talking to, they can't use the transfer portal because they serve a different purpose than going to school just to play ball, so to speak, as Cardell Jones would say. I do think, though, that they're going to be, for the restrictions that they do have as a military academy, because you have to stay at a certain weight, I think they're going to be pretty good in the trenches. They're returning Brady Small, an interior offensive lineman who was a first-team all-conference guy in the American, and then they also bring back Jack Buzzum, who is a edge rusher, who is a third-team all-conference guy as well. So I do think there's some potential here for Army to make a run because even in a down year, they still beat a power conference team in Kansas State, a Kansas State team that did end up being bowl eligible. The Tarleton State loss was tough to stomach at first, but I mean Tarleton State, they get a lot of love as a team that could potentially make the jump at the FBS. So yes, they lost to an FCS team, but if you're going to lose to an FCS team, Tarleton State is not the worst thing in the world. I'm with you though. I just think the teams on this list, I think, have more upside than Army, or at least have a better starting point than the Black Knights do. But there's some interesting things to like, and I do like Jeff Monken. He's done an incredible job at the military academies. Now, with that being said, who am I looking at? So AT does have Army at 7, so he's about at the same range as us. Colton's a lot higher, though. Colton also has him at number 5.
Okay.
So
Okay.
We'll take a look at Colton's notes as the
Can I
as
make a
the
prediction real quick?
messenger.
Can I make a
Yeah, go
prediction real
ahead.
quick on his? I think he makes a note on Kale Helms coming back.
Yes, yes, you are right.
Yeah.
The fact that they do retain Kale Helms, I think is that's a big reason. Very high on him. Does love also that Monken is back yet again for his 14th year being a head coach. So
Yeah.
Colton think that his Army team they could mix things up here a little bit. That's for sure. Um, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get things rolling here, getting into that top half. But before I get into the top half, though, if you guys have been enjoying this American Conference breakdown, first of all, really appreciate you guys watching it and tuning with the show. If you're enjoying the show and you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on other platforms as well, we're getting quite a bit of traffic actually on Twitter. So thank you everybody that's watching on Twitter right now. Make sure you go ahead and hit that follow button over on Twitter, whether you're watching for me or whether you're watching through for Reed as well. My fellow co-host and compadre. Now, number 7, getting the things going here and starting the second half. I was surprisingly lower on Memphis than what I thought I was going to be. I had Memphis at 7. I was really surprised that I arrived at that conclusion because Memphis has been one of the best programs in this conference.
Can I just hold on? As big of a fan of Charles Huff as you are, you only have them at 7.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
And what we talked about is we did a tier maker
Yep.
for all the new hires, and I did have Charles Huff as a home run hire. So I'm saying this still thinking that Charles Huff is a home run hire, right?
We still love you, Charles Huff. We still love you.
We have incredible love for Charles Huff. Please do not
Yes.
put this in the hype video. They actually lost quite a bit of talent, like in the transfer portal. And a lot of the talent that they brought in outside of Southern Miss is pretty unproven, or they're players that are at the Division II level. And with the bulk of your, I guess, most notable additions being from Southern Miss, a team that did fade down the stretch, like in the last few games in a lesser conference, you are stepping up to a higher level of play. So I wonder how a team that is essentially made up of guys that you brought in from Marshall and Southern Miss the last couple of years, how is that going to hold up in the American, where top to bottom it's a little bit more competitive than what you see in the Sun Belt. They do have a lot of additions, but again, they also lost a lot of talent too, to not only Arkansas, where Ryan Silverfield went, but also to other power conference teams as well.
Yeah, Memphis is an intriguing team to look out for. It's solely because of everything you talked about, losing production to go with Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas, but also carrying on, what Charles Huff had at Southern Miss and doing exactly what he did for Marshall, basically uplifting the roster and bringing it to another program. Memphis is kind of a wild card team for me. I'm higher than them. I'm higher on them than 7, but they're a wild card team just solely because they do lose a ton of the production that they did have. Brendan Lewis is not there at quarterback. Their top 5 running backs that were on their roster last year are no longer there. So how do you replace Sutton Smith and Greg Desser? I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name. Greg, their top 2 running backs. How do you replace that production? Cortez Braham at receiver, 800-yard receiver. He's no longer there. So how do you replace that? So they went in the portal, exactly like you said, brought in a ton of portal players, the second to highest rated portal class in the American. And because of that, I have them 3rd. I have Memphis 3rd. Now, this is a Charles Huff effect. I am very high on Charles Huff. Now, I could look like a buffoon in a few months if Charles Huff, slides in year 1 or doesn't live up to my expectations of him. But I think Huff is shown to bring in a ton of production from other places and be pretty successful with it in year 1. I think that takes another step up. We saw him uplift his roster from Marshall, bring it to Southern Miss. They went 7-5 in his first year, which in your first year at a new program is solid. That's the definition of a solid year. So I think he takes a step up. They have a potential to win nine or 10 games in this conference, I believe. I'm really high on Memphis coming this year. Again, biggest question with a couple of other teams we've talked about on this list so far is quarterback. How do they replace that? They bring in Marcus Stokes from West Florida. Now, I think a lot of people aren't talking about this acquisition of Marcus Stokes from West Florida, and I didn't have his stats up in front of me, but I was looking at them
So I
earlier.
actually got him because I
Okay,
actually did
yeah,
have him as an intriguing addition. I mean,
yeah,
this is a guy that did throw for almost 3,300 yards and 30 touchdowns. I
yes,
so
yep.
I'm interested to see who wins that starting quarterback job. They did also bring in Aaron Nolan, who
Yep.
transferred formerly of Ohio State. Then he was at South Carolina for a year. Now he's at Memphis. Uh, I don't think it's a done deal that Aaron Nolan is going to be the starting quarterback. I think Marcus
No.
Stokes at least does push for the starting quarterback job, and if he doesn't, that's not a bad thing in the world to have someone that does have experience playing at a lower level being your backup quarterback. It's going to be an underrated battle, I think, to watch.
Yeah, I wouldn't even pencil in Aaron Nolan as the starter. I
Mm,
seriously think Marcus
that's fair.
Stokes has a serious chance of being the starter for this team. Just
Yeah,
so
that's not
because
ridiculous.
as we talked about, Marcus Stokes has experience as a starter granted, it's not a Division One level, but he was very productive in his time as a starter. So I mean, that's exactly like you said. This is that's a very intriguing quarterback matchup and battle that's going to be happening throughout spring ball and fall. But I think either way, I'm very high on Memphis, no matter which way they go quarterback. I lean Marcus Stokes right now just solely because he is a more proven product, but they could go either way, and I'm very high on Memphis either way. So I'm good. I'm going with Memphis at third.
Yeah, is just like the idea. And I'm high on Marcus Stokes. I'm curious to see how he is. It's just always scary to have the prospect of having someone that was playing Division II football last year
Yeah.
becoming your starting quarterback up at the FBS level. That is a scary thought, which was part of the reason why I had them at number 7. Because not every one of those Division II quarterbacks ends up like a Trinidad Chambliss, who ends up lighting the college football world on fire. Like some of these guys ended up at Division II for one reason or another. I'm curious to see what Colton and AT have though for Memphis. So we're going to start with AT. AT similar to you. He thinks this Memphis
Whoa.
football team
Okay.
potentially playing for a conference championship game. So he's at number 2.
And he's in the chat now, so he can elaborate.
Yeah, he can.
Whoa,
And
Colton.
Colton's number 1. So it's me.
Okay.
Am I the problem? That's a question that we need to answer here
I
tonight.
think I think it's more us, not you.
Well, we'll see about that. But yeah, it's I basically stopped us from doing a Connect Four, which I take full
Yes.
blame and I take full responsibility for. It's going to be interesting to see if Charles Huff has Memphis competing for a title or if it's going to be a middle pack team. I could be looking at this and talking a little bit more about the worst case scenario, but we'll see though. So you clearly didn't have Memphis at number 7. So who did
No.
you have at number 7 though?
Who I did have at number 7, and I hope this doesn't shock too many people, but it's going to be the Tulane Green Wave at number 7. Now, as I think I should just let Colton's description talk for me here, but I am not high on Will Hall at all as their next head coach. Coming off of some of the best success they've had in program history with John Summerall at the helm, I am not a Will Hall guy. And you look at his time at Southern Miss, what did we say his record was, Jake, when we did it? Was like 14-40 or something in 3.5 seasons. It was, yeah, it was horrific. So, and they lost a ton of production to the portal. Now they did bring in the top portal class in the conference, but I don't see that being very, productive here in year 1 with Will Hall. I don't know. I can't get over them hiring a head coach that was uh 11-40. Now I misspoke. I said top portal class in the conference. That's completely wrong. They were 10th in the conference in their portal class. How could I ever disregard South Florida? Anyway, yeah, Tulane didn't make that great of additions to me personally. I think they take a massive step off from where they were last year. Winning the American, making the college football playoff. I don't think Will Hall's the answer long term, so I'm going to put them 7th now, and I think they are. I hope Colton steals the shine here. I'm putting Tulane 7th.
So this is going to surprise you deeply, Reed. I had Tulane as my second best team in this conference.
Okay.
So
maybe I am the problem.
Yeah. Well, it's not you, it's me, I promise. So for a team that lost their head coach to a power conference program, they actually do return a handful of all conference caliber players. So Jack T, where I'm not going to go ahead and worry about that last name. You can Google it up yourself. He was a first team all conference guy. He's still here at Tulane. And then they do also bring a couple of guys that are pivotal to the special teams we've seen play a really big role in terms of these close games. In Oregon State, we found this out on the opposite side of things. So they brought back, a couple of those guys like on the special team as well. They did also really did a nice job of making sure that their line play was going to be maintained. They brought in a 4-star recruit in Tylan George. And then they also added a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball. So their trench play should be pretty good, all things considered. They're going to need to figure out who their quarterback is going to be. Jake Redsoff, he's off to the NFL. Losing Jaheim Johnson definitely does hurt as well. But I am willing to give benefit of the doubt to Tulane in this situation, though, because we have seen Tulane be, at least over the past 4 to 5 years, one of the best programs, not just in this conference, but being one of the best programs in the entire G5. And so I think there's so much talent to work here in year number 1. And we talked about how we both don't like Will Hall. I think there's still so much talent here that even Will Hall can't fuck it up in year number 1. So I'm high on this Tulane team in spite of Will Hall. If he's closer to the middle of the pack, I will say this, it will 100% be his fault. I will say that right now.
Yeah. Just to piggyback off the comment you made real quick, replacing 3 offensive line starters. Their entire running back room is going to be flipped, adding 3 portal players. And the biggest of them all, their quarterback, Zion Chris Gramillion. I hope I said that right. He comes in at quarterback by way of Houston. So I guess we're penciling him in as the starter, but didn't get a ton of game time at Houston when he was there. Their receiver room is kind of spotty from the looks of it on their depth chart. So a ton of unproven talent on this roster, like mainstream proven talent. But I don't disagree, Jake. They do have a lot of talent. It's just if Will Hall can utilize this roster and his coaching staff can use it to the best of their ability and, get them to the runner up in the conference. I just don't see it going that way.
Yeah, and that's fair. I definitely I could definitely see a scenario where Will Hall does not learn from his mistakes when he was a head coach at Southern Miss for the last 3 to 4 years, and we're talking a few years from now, Tulane having a brand new head coach, not because he went up to the power level to become a head coach. It's probably because it went similar to what happened at Southern Miss. But hey, he has been away from the head coaching duties for multiple years. Maybe he has learned from his mistakes, and we see a better second half. So that could also happen as well. We'll see what our boys also think of Tulane. So AT is similar to me. He has them at third. So, giving them a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt, just like I'm giving them a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt. Colton, however, is even lower on Tulane than you are. He has them in the bottom half at number 9.
I need to hear this monologue.
Yeah, and let me tell you what he had about Tulane. Okay, we have the notes on the miniature Redzone notes collector. He despises the Will Hall hire maliciously. We're using 3 to 4 syllable words. You know that he means it from his chest.
Despises it.
Yeah, he is unimpressed with the roster additions. He I don't know how much this matters. This probably goes into why I had him as the biggest loser. The schedule is hyenas, but that doesn't really matter here. I just want to make sure that was said. That was in his notes. I'm just a messenger though, and he's wondering if the program foundation makes an impact. I'm assuming that's in a positive way. So I'm assuming if this was not Tulane, he probably would have this team lower. But because it is Tulane, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here. But we'll see if Will Hall finds a way to mess it up. That's all I'm going to say about that situation.
Well, we might have just lost a viewer in Out of the Rhythm Fantasy. As you can see by the graphic, we do not have Tulane number one. So I apologize, my friend.
Damn, I'm about to get blocked on Twitter. Then what a shame.
They just followed me today too. I was like, shit.
Shoot, starting back from square one, huh? That's crazy. All right. So number 6, though, I did want to mention this team. I had UTSA at number 6. That was going to be my number 16 for this upcoming year. Silently been one of the best programs in the G5. I like what Jeff Traylor has done at UTSA. Them having a little bit of a down year last year with how crazy the coaching carousel cycle was, not the worst thing in the world because there was a lot of head coaching openings. And if UTSA was a couple of wins better, we might have seen Jeff Traylor leave. But because he didn't, I think that's very beneficial. They do have, I believe, the McCown kid is still back. I can't remember his name, but I mean, like that's Josh McCown's son.
Owen.
Yeah, Owen McCown. Yeah, I mean, Owen McCown's back. He's one of the better quarterbacks in this conference. I do love that they added Assad Chapman. He's a 4-star recruit as a true freshman. He's going to start for UTSA right away, and it's going to be a really dynamic secondary with the addition of also Nate Robinson and Xavier Walton, both very productive players at their previous spots as well. They also added Josiah Sampleton on the defensive line. So I think the defense is going to be flying around, which I think is going to raise the floor to this UTSA team because UTSA, this was one of the more talented teams in the conference last year. The problem with UTSA was that they were just not consistent enough. And with the additions that they made on the defensive side of the ball, I think this is going to certainly help them be more consistent. So I have them at number 6 for that reason.
Yeah, UTSA, I have a slight tick higher than you. I have them at number 5. As you said, Owen McCown does return at quarterback. Biggest question offensively for me is replacing the production of Robert Henry Jr., obviously going to the NFL draft, 1,000-yard rusher, 9 touchdowns, another 100 yards through the receiving game. So, but they do have a capable running back coming back. Redshirt freshman Will Henderson III. Watch out for him when it comes to the UTSA offense. Another 800-yard rusher with 6 touchdowns last season in 13 games played. So Will Henderson III is going to be the main tailback out of the backfield. Also, Marion Peterson, a former 4-star recruit, is also in that running back room. So they also added Brandon Hyde Jr., transfer from Cal, in the running back room. So I think this running back group from UTSA is going to be the standout of the offense. But Owen McCown, obviously, his production coming back at quarterback is huge. What am I missing in this chat? Man, AT, man, distracting me. They do bring back some production at receiver. Amador II, AJ Wilson, DJ Allen Jr. All got very valuable game time last year for UTSA. So, another big question for me offensively, their entire left side of the offensive line is gone. Trevor Tim is at left guard, and Kamar Missouri at left tackle, both graduated. So shoring up that left side of the offensive line is going to be huge. Lost a ton of production on the defensive line, either through transfers or graduation, a ton of transfers on the defensive line, but they do retool with a ton of production on the defensive line. Drennan Fight the third, transferred in from Western Kentucky, is a name to watch on the defensive line. The former 3-star recruit added to this UTSA defensive line. Also, Dylan Spencer transferring in from Texas Tech. Again, Power 4 experience is huge. Also, Eddie Smith transferring in from Texas Tech as well, both with multiple years of eligibility left. So I'm high on UTSA. Again, as we said last year, they couldn't buy a win away from home.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
the
if they can
notable.
figure out how to win away from the Alamo Dome, this is a very dangerous football team. They already
Oh,
are.
oh, for sure. I mean, the two notable games last year, they upset Tulane at home and then got dog walked by South Florida the following week. So, yeah, UTSA, as long as they can stay consistent, that's their biggest thing. They have a ton of production that is returning offensively that I think they're going to be able to put up points for sure. And yeah, I think they're going to be a very competitive team in this conference. And as you said, Jake, they've slightly been one of the better G5 teams of recent years. So I expect UTSA to keep taking steps up, and be competitive in the American.
Yeah, and UTSA has certainly shown that they've been a very good addition to this conference ever
Yes.
since leaving Conference USA a few years ago, where Jeff Traylor was part of those CUSA championship teams for UTSA in 2021 and 2022 as well. Still searching for that first American title as the Roadrunners head coach. We'll see what we have in terms of. So AT's a little lower, actually quite a bit lower. He has UTSA at number 9 for this upcoming season. We'll see if Colton is similar to AT or to us. Colton is similar to us. He has UTSA at number 4. So Colton a little bit closer to our way of thinking, whereas AT is he's in that I got some questions, and I don't know if they're going to be they answered like at this time yet or not. But with that being said, I know you didn't have UTSA at number 6. Who comes in as your number 6 team, though?
My number 6 team is going to be the North Texas Mean Green. Similar to Tulane, I mean, you could basically call Oklahoma State the North Texas Mean Green now because of all the production, the staff that they lost to Oklahoma State, following Eric Morris to Stillwater. This Mean Green team, I think is going to be similar to Tulane, take a step back. In Neil Brown's first season, the former West Virginia head coach was the definition of average during his time in Morgantown. That's not a shot at him personally. It's just his coaching style being average. So North Texas, I think, takes a step back. They do have the second-rated portal class, but the additions that they did make, I'm not too high on. I mean, notably, they lost their top 2 quarterbacks. They lost Messemaker and Poffenbarger. I think that's how you say his last name. So their top 2 quarterbacks they lost. Caleb Hawkins out of the backfield they lost. A number of receivers they lost, but they do make some interesting additions. Chasten Didda from East Carolina did start the bowl game for them last year. Looked pretty solid in the bowl game for East Carolina last year. Does come over to North Texas. I'm penciling him in as the starter, but don't overlook Taven Jackson either at quarterback. Brings experience in from Central Florida. Who else here? I'm scrolling down. Jaheim White from West Virginia is going to be probably your most notable player on offense for North Texas. Coming over from West Virginia. He was rumored to be going, or at least recruited by a couple of other Power 4 schools. I know he was in some rumors with Penn State because he was from Pennsylvania originally. So, and other Power 4 additions at receiver and on the offensive line. So North Texas definitely has a lot of upside for sure. I'm curious to see where you have them, Jake, because I mean, obviously I think you're also pretty high on them, at least by how the graphic is looking, but North Texas, I think, is going to be in that above average range. I just think they take a little bit of regression in Neil Brown's first year.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is going to be a little bit of a regression to a point where I don't have them as a top 2 team, but I don't see them as too far off. I actually had them as high as number 3 in my rankings. We know that they're going to take a step back. I think that's fairly understood. But we're talking about taking a step back from being, an 11-1 football team and one of the most dynamic offenses in the entire country, regardless of conference. The loss of Drew Messamaker, Caleb Hawkins, and Wyatt Young, those are all going to be those are all stars. And Oklahoma State is very lucky to have them. But at the same time, though, I actually thought they did a pretty good job going into transfer portal and at least making sure that they replenish their weapons offensively. I still think this is going to be a dynamic group filled with weapons, whether you're talking about a Nick Osha or Grayson O'Bara or a Breck Wall. Breck Long, the tight end in particular, he transferred in from South Alabama. And then TJ Chunklula from Black Hills State. They got guys that produced, which I think is really important, that they have guys that are experienced and guys that went out and played high-level football, or at least played really well at their previous stops. But I will say this, I think they do take a step back, not because of their offense. I think the offense is going to be fine. Defensively, I do think they're going to be taking that step back because I don't think they did as much defensively. I think the linebackers could be okay, bringing in Aaron Alexander and Cedric Roberts from the transfer portal. I think the kicking game will be good. They brought in an all-conference kicker and Dominic DeFreitas from Appalachian State.
Yeah.
I think the defense is ultimately going to be the reason why. I think offensively they're going to be fine. And Neil Brown does know how to win in the G5. So he's been away from head coaching for a couple years now. Could be he's learned from mistakes at West Virginia. He also gets back to his roots, being in a similar footprint as when he was with Troy all those years ago. So I still think that North Texas, they're going to be in the mix. I still think that they will have a team that will give a lot of other teams a hard time. And I would be willing to pick to win over. But I do think they do take a slight step back. Colton is in a similar spot. He's got them at number 6. And then AT, actually AT is the lowest. He's at 8.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think like AT here. Have a new entire offensive line. That receiver group did get gutted, as he said in the chat. North Texas will have to take a huge step. One of the players on offense that is most intriguing to me is James Tyre. Now, you're probably thinking, James Tyre, where did he come from? He transferred in from Western Carolina. 87 targets, 68 catches, 832 yards, and 8.2 yards per catch. Now, obviously replacing the production of Wyatt Young, Miles Coleman, Cameron Dorner, all transferring or going to the draft / graduating. They got some notable receivers to make up for the production that they lost. So I don't hate the shout, Jake, of them being third, because they do have that upside of production that they brought in. It's just, I say this a lot about mass portal teams. Are they going to be able to mesh all as a cohesive unit in such a little amount of time? I get it that they have spring ball and fall camp now, but I mean, that's a handful of practices that they all get together. It's just, are they going to be able to, mesh together and be cohesive and on time together, as a cohesive unit? And yes, shout out to the Catamounts. Thank you, Colton.
With incredible team game. But I do think with the production that they did bring in, it could have been a lot worse for North Texas. I don't think that it's as bad as what's made out to be. So I do think the baseline is a little bit higher than I think anticipated. But I do think that among the teams that I have in my top 5, I do think North Texas does have the lowest floor. Because of a lot of what you mentioned in terms of they have to go mesh. So it
Yes.
could get ugly pretty quickly if we do see that worst case scenario.
Yeah. Also, just real quick on North Texas because of their schedule. Could you imagine if they kept everyone from this past season on their roster now? Because they open up at the defending national champion, the Indiana Hoosiers. Could you imagine if they kept everyone on that roster and they had to play Indiana week 1? That would have been one
Yeah.
of the best games week 1. That would
Yeah,
have been
it would.
must-watch television.
Yeah, it would not be crazy to see North Texas at least be in that conversation, be ranked in the top 25. Um,
Yeah.
it and we saw that team stay together like the core for the next couple of years. We could have been talking about a team that's as good as like a 2021 Cincinnati or those Boise State teams that we saw in the early 2010s, late 2000s.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we live in a different era, so it is what it is. But at the same time, I I'm willing to think that the baseline is a little bit higher than consensus, but
Mhm.
I do agree that there is a world where they could be worse than even what AT has North Texas. It could be ugly if it does not mesh.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
The next team that I do have, though, I think does have a higher floor. I do have Southern Florida here as my number 5 team. Um, for a team that did lose its head coach, I actually didn't think that they were gutted all that badly outside of losing Byron Brown. They do have a couple of interesting players at the quarterback position. Michael Van Buren, who did play in the back end when Garrett Nussmeier, he was a little bit more banged up towards the end of the year. Over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. Given it was a rocky situation with an interim head coach, I thought Van Buren played well. But I don't think he's automatically the starter, though. Another quarterback to watch is KJ Cooper out of Texas Southern, who's got some very good traits. He's got some experience playing at the HBCU level. They also brought in Kenny Odom as well. Kenny Odom was really one of the few bright spots on the UTEP football team. Was one of the best receivers in the Conference USA. Bringing him in, I thought was going to be is a pretty nice boost. DJ Crowder should also be a pretty nice running back addition as well for him. Transferring in from Dartmouth, he had nearly 1,000 yards on the ground last year. And then they do also bring one of my favorite names in college football, Nico Grammatica,
Yes.
second team all-conference kicker for his UFF squad last year. So special teams should be pretty solid. Why I couldn't have him in my top 4 is Brian Hartline being inexperienced as a head coach. So I do have to ding him from that aspect. But even with what they lost in the transfer portal, there's a lot to like about this USF team.
Yeah, so much to like about this USF team that I have him as my top team in the
Mm.
rankings. And AT made another great point that I was gonna say that Van Buren also has starting time at Mississippi State. Now, to get a transfer quarterback that has starting experience in the SEC, now granted, Mississippi State wasn't anything crazy that year, but starting experience in the SEC is starting experience. So to be able to get that experience and implement it into Brian Hartline's system in year 1, I think is going to be huge. Um, Now, replacing the production of Byron Brown, like you said, Jake, is going to be a huge step for them. But I think they are capable of doing it. Cartavius Norton is probably going to be your lead back in the backfield. Now I'm trying to pull up their transfer class. Yeah, it's not loading for me. But anyway, I'm high on South Florida just solely because I am a full Brian Hartline guy. I am really high on him as a head coach. I was very shocked to see South Florida land him just solely because I thought he was going to land at a Power 4 job. So I
Yep.
think at South Florida to land a coach replacing Alex Golish, who brought that team to very successful seasons, and replace him with Brian Hartline, who has a ton of upside as a head coach, and getting the top portal class in all of the G5, top portal class in your conference. I think if South Florida hits all the right buttons, they have potential to be a contender for the G5 spot in the playoff, in my opinion. So, South Florida, I do have penciling in right now as my American champion in 2026. Just a ton of upside that I'm really buying into.
Yeah, and a really interesting point about Brian Hartline in terms of him being the aspect of him being a power conference coach, a head coach. I remember when the Cincinnati job came open after Luke Fickell left to become the
Yeah.
head coach of Wisconsin. I thought that Brian Hartline should have been the head coach at Cincinnati, and he would just stay there until Ryan Day decided that he was done coaching at Ohio State, take an NFL job, retire, whatever, and be the eventual head coach at Ohio State. So I had Brian Hartline on my head coaching radar for years now, and
Mhm.
for him to wait this long, I do think that it is going to be a borderline home run hire for USF. Plus, he's going to be in an area that he knows how to recruit extremely
Yes.
well. He
Yes.
knows South Florida recruiting. He's gone in there in Ohio State. He's won plenty of recruiting battles, particularly for his wide receivers that we do see end up going to the NFL. Again, how is he going to be as a head coach? He's going to be inexperienced in that aspect of coaching. And what is that going to look like in terms of, is he going to wear multiple hats, or is he going to be more of a CEO type? That's what I'm going to be
Yeah.
really curious about in terms of how he runs his operation, which is why I was a little bit lower. But
Mhm.
again, I could definitely see why you're so high on USF at the same time, because there is a lot to like about this football team. Now, do our compadres like USF as much as you do? So Colton does. Colton at least is projecting that USF is also playing in that American Championship game. But what about AT? AT is not. AT
Mm.
is actually lower than I am. He has them at number 6. Maybe some of that's because they lost Brian Brown and also an inexperienced head coach.
Yep.
But I definitely understand, because again, when you're talking about this conference and you get into this part of the upper half, you're really splitting hairs here.
Yeah, again, South Florida, if they hit all the right buttons, and I think if Brian Harlan is at least giving some input in the offensive play calling, that they have all the upside in the world. Again, like I said earlier, look at Ohio State when Brian Harlan was the main play caller throughout the regular season. They were
Mhm.
dynamic. They were one of, if not the best offense in the country. You know, and I think if Brian Harlan has that same impact on South Florida, it could be an immediate impact. They could be an automatic contender in the
Yeah.
G5 for me personally. So I could see where AT's coming from, place them at 6, because there are those, complications that could come up. They don't mesh all together. There's some, unforeseen issues that we don't see. Where you have them at 5 and AT has them at 6. I totally understand that. They're definitely one of those variance teams that could have the highest ceiling, or a middle of the pack, maybe even worse if it all goes worse than that. So yeah, for sure, South Florida is definitely a variance team for next season.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious to see if you feel the same thing about your number 4 team on your
Mhm.
list. As we're starting to get into the last couple of teams that we're breaking down for this American preview. So, I mean, you said a
Yeah.
lot of great things about USF. How are we feeling about this number 4 team, depending on who it is?
Yeah, so my number 4 team is going to be the East Carolina Pirates. Now, a lot of it seems to be a consensus, at least on my timeline, of East Carolina. A lot of people are high on East Carolina coming in this season, coming off the bowl victory against Pitt, which is massive for a G5 team to get a bowl win against a power 4 opponent. They do lose their top 2 quarterbacks on their roster, Caden Hauser, going to Illinois. Chasten did it, as we said before, going to in conference opponent North Texas. So it's gonna be interesting to see how East Carolina stacks up against their fellow conference opponents, just solely because of losing that quarterback productivity. They do bring in Texas Tech transfer Mitch Griffiths, formerly also of Wake Forest. He doesn't have real game time as a starter per se, but he does bring in Power 4 experience. And just a fun side fact, I did play against Mitch Griffiths in high school, so I have seen him in person. He's a very good a player. So Mitch Griffiths coming in at quarterback, one of the more intriguing additions to this roster, former 4-star recruit Michael Allen at running
Mm,
back, came in from
yeah.
Marshall. Doesn't have the flashiest stats of a player added through the portal, but you have to go with the upside of a former 4-star recruit coming in from a fellow G5 opponent in Marshall. I think he has a ton of upside just solely because of that pedigree of being a former 4-star recruit. Another former 4-star recruit added to this roster, Ray Joseph, coming in from Miami. Again, Miami was littered with receivers last year, so he didn't get a ton of the playing time that you would expect of a transfer receiver. But again, another former 4-star recruit, you have to go with that upside. And also the production of Jakeith Hamilton and Landon Sides of North Texas, a near 500-yard receiver. Jakeith Hamilton, excuse me, also a near 500-yard receiver. So there's a ton of upside to this East Carolina team with the additions they made offensively. The biggest question mark offensively is going to be their offensive line. They're replacing all 5 of their offensive line starters, at least on paper. It looks that way. They're definitely gonna have to replace them all. It's just how they do so of their starters from last year. Defensively, didn't really lose too much production. The only production that they did lose was through graduation from the most part, except for Zion Wilson. Did lose him to Virginia on the defensive line through a transfer, but added a couple guys back through the portal. A couple more additions at linebacker added through the portal. So I think East Carolina definitely has potential to be an above average team in this conference, upwards of 8, 9, 10 wins for sure. I think they're definitely going to be a competitive team and take a step forward with Blake Harrell at the helm.
Yeah, and I'm right with you, Reed. I also have East Carolina as my number 4 team as well. For a lot of the same points that you made, I like what they did in terms of how they finished the year strong, in spite of the fact that they lost their quarterback to the transfer portal before the bowl game. I do think, even though they are losing quite a bit on the offensive line, I thought that they did an admirable job of replacing some of that production.
Yeah.
One of the guys that they did bring in, his name does escape me, but he was an offensive lineman at Kennesaw State, was an all-conference guy in the Conference USA. So even with those kinds of losses, I still think that the offensive line talent is going to be similar to last year.
Yeah.
And we saw what Eastern Carolina was last year. This was the type of football team where the majority of the time they were the ones that were pushing teams around in the trenches, not the other way around. With that being said, because of the fact that I think they're going to have an offensive line advantage in the vast majority of the teams that they go up against, that alone raises the floor of this football team, which is why I had them at number 4, along with some of the things that you mentioned as well, that you certainly hit on the head too.
Yeah. Brandon Best was the offensive lineman you were thinking of.
Yes, that's who I was thinking of. It he
How
got
did you not think of the best?
Yeah, he clearly not me, evidently. Crazy stuff out here, man. But yeah, it's he got lost in the sauce. He got lost in my notes as well. I think we might have consensus on East Carolina being in the top 4 as well, but I'm curious to see what Colton and AT have. So we do see that AT also is at number 4. The graphic does end up being saved because he does not have East Carolina at number 4, because that's going to belong to the 3rd spot. So, pretty good consensus here about East Carolina being in the top 4.
You know what I just realized about this graphic? Colton's number 10 team hasn't been filled out yet. And I mean, compared to what the other 3 of us have, it's he's very low on one team compared to the rest of us. So.
I'll have to read his notes, but you have him at number 2. I think we know what that final team is, because they're the last team remaining on the graphic. But
I do.
definitely am curious to hear what you're seeing, because it seems like me, you, and AT, we all have a similar wavelength. So I'm curious with what you're seeing.
Yep, and shout out to my old man. I do have the Navy Midshipmen as my 2nd best team in the American going into 2026. Again, as we prefaced earlier, it's hard for a Surface Academy to find production because they can't go through the portal. They have to do all their production in recruiting. So I think for Navy, they run the triple option the best of any team in the country over the past handful of years. losing the production of Blake Horvath at quarterback is going to be their biggest question mark. Braxton Woodson does return at quarterback. He did get a little bit of gameplay last year, so I think Braxton Woodson is a capable quarterback to take over the reins of this Navy offense. Now, losing production of Texa, Heidenreich, Chapman is going to be massive, and especially in a triple option offense. A lot of that production that is in that running back fullback hybrid room is unproven right now, but I think Navy knows how to produce great running backs and fullbacks. So I wouldn't expect anything less of this Navy football team. And I think Brian Newberry is just a very underrated head coach in general. Ever since taking over for Ken Niumatalolo in Navy, he was there for the longest time. I could not tell you how long he was there off the top of my head, but he was there for a long time. So I think Brian Newberry has taken the reins of this Navy team, and obviously are going to be very competitive year in and year out under his tenure. In my opinion, again, their offensive line, they returned 4 starters of the offensive line. Ben Purvis at left guard is the only one they're going to have to replace. So obviously offensive line continuity plays huge to a team, especially of Navy style, where you're running a handful of plays every game that, are so deceiving. And their defense, obviously replacing Landon Robinson is going to be a huge hole to fill on the defensive line. But it's Navy. If I said anything else about Navy and my old man saw this, I probably wouldn't be allowed back in his house. So, the Navy midshipman at number 2. I'm happy to see that you and AT also have Navy, up here with me. Colton, you're going to be getting a phone call with me right after the show, because what are we doing that disservice to our troops? Also, to have Army 5 spots above them is completely disrespectful. But I digress. Navy as the second best team.
Yeah, so I do have Colton's notes, so like in order to defend his honor.
Okay.
So
Right.
what he has for Navy is he's concerned about the loss of Blake Horvath, which I mean I understand where he's coming from.
Yep, totally.
And that just creates a high variance in terms of what to expect from this Navy football team. But I do think number 10, as you mentioned, is probably the very worst case scenario. Because they do bring multiple all-conference guys back. Particularly Mark Anthony Parker is someone I'm excited to see. Third-team all-conference guy last year. He's back with this Navy football team. He's going to be one of the undisputed leaders of this defense. In terms of what I had as my personal tier 1 of who I think is most likely to win a conference championship between Navy, Tulane, and North Texas, that was my top 3. At the end of the day, Brian Newberry, that was the head coach that I trusted the most. And they had the least amount of turn because they didn't worry about having to replace their head coach during the coaching carousel. So for me, it was primarily Brian Newberry being here and being the head coach that I trust the most out of teams that I had as my contender.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That upper tier of our top 3 teams between the 4 of us all have a shot to win the conference in our opinions. I totally see your argument of Brian Newberry being the most consistent head coach in that top 3-4 grouping that we all have. He's proven to be a winner at Navy so far. And again, I might have a personal bias towards him, but I think Navy is just a very underrated football team. And if it wasn't for a tiebreaker scenario, they were playing for a conference championship last year. So I think they get right back to that level again in 2026.
Yeah, and people forget that Navy was a football team. They went 11-2 last year.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know that Tulane got more attention, North Texas got more attention. USF obviously got more attention from the statement that they made in September. Navy was just a quiet, steady hand, and they were a football team that silently was one of the best G5 teams in the country last year.
Yes, and also let's not forget at one point they were in a playoff conversation. Yep. I forget which ranking it was, but they were slotted as the 12th team in the playoff at one point. So they were right in contention all year.
Yeah, and I remember in the month of October, I at one point I had them. You might have saw my my
Yeah,
playoff breakdown. Who knows? But I know at one point I had Navy as my highest ranked like G5 football team. They then lost to Notre Dame, so that had to change.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean Navy was a part of that conversation for a while. Uh, there was one question that I saw in the chat that I wanted
sure.
to touch up on before we sign off here tonight. It was over on Twitter. Our guy Oral asked, which league do y'all think is better, the
Ooh,
American or the Pac 12? And then he continues, like a couple messages later, after last season, is there even an argument on how the Pac could be better? Would love to hear y'all's thoughts. Me personally, I think the top is comparable. Boise State is a really strong program, obviously, and then we saw some strides from San Diego State as well. I think Washington State is fascinating out there. Ditto with Texas State. But really, when you get into the middle and underbelly, I think the American is better. So because I think the
yeah.
top is similar, because we have seen both conferences with their champion make the playoff the last couple of years, but the middle and the bottom being better for the American, I would personally give the American Conference the edge.
Yeah, totally. And I agree with every point you just said. I also think the Pac-12 has a nostalgia feel for college football fans in general, just so because we're used to watching, Pac-12 after dark, watching those out west, those West Coast teams, play till 11 midnight, 1 in the morning on the East Coast. So we're used to that as college football fans, just staying up late and the nostalgia of the Pac-12. But at this current moment, as we sit here in 2026, the American is I wouldn't say far better conference, but top to bottom is a better conference than the Pac-12 for sure.
Yeah, like I would certainly argue that the American and the Pac 12 would be in that same tier
Oh yeah,
in terms of conference prowess. But if we're
yes,
ranking conferences within the tier, I would also go on to say that the American would be slotted above the Pac 12. But it's certainly, there's arguments to be made why the Pac 12 could be considered a better conference by the end of the year, too.
yeah. I mean, they both have their own unique styles to them by play on the field. I mean, but also I think they both have chances to be in that G5 representative conversation. Boise
Mhm.
State's going to be right back in that conversation, in my opinion. The teams we just talked about: South Florida, Navy, Memphis, East Carolina. I'm just trying to remember our top fours. Like all those teams are going to be in that conversation as well. So I mean, again, the Pac-12 I feel like has a lot of nostalgia for college football fans, and Algorithm just said it in the chat as well. The Pac-12 isn't the Pac-12 anymore. You
Yeah.
know what it used to be 5-6 years ago is no longer. We hope it gets back to that, especially this year, them being back at a full conference schedule. So yeah, I think the Americans better at this point, but as you said, Jake, I could totally see them, be on level playing fields, especially by the end of this next season for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and we're gonna definitely have an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into the Pac-12 like later. We are
Yes.
gonna preview every conference. The Pac-12 is a little bit of a ways away, but for now, hopefully you guys did have the opportunity to enjoy this complete breakdown of the American Conference. We told you guys it was going to be a jam-packed show,
Yes.
and you know what? I'm usually someone that likes to tell the truth and only the truth to you guys. I would not lie to you, and hopefully we didn't lie to you. We had a great show tonight. Appreciate everyone tuning in, regardless of platform that you're tuning in from. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, as well as Thursday we will head out a little bit more to a West Coast centric. I won't reveal which West Coast oriented conference we're going to look at next, but very excited to hear what we think about this particular conference next. But in the meantime, hopefully you guys are all out there having a great night. And I hope y'all are all out there and taking care of yourselves. Peace.